I'm not sure how much you know about me. Granted, I've made 60 videos over the span of a little more than a year, but I wouldn't say that my opinions have been fully put out there. For that, I've been thinking of making a new kind of video, but more on that on another time. More importantly, I really like parents. I think, when they're used correctly, they could be incredibly interesting. I think parents present an interesting dynamic compared to other characters. While it's not integral for someone to have or be responsible for a child to understand what it means to be responsible, I think that being a parent, a guardian, or even a partner changes who you are. I mean, probably. Dear old mother from Not Even Bones isn't helping my case. But our next character might help my case. The CEO and founder of Young Technologies, Samuel A. Young. And unlike my last two characters, I actually knew his name. Appearing in episode 7, his first introduction is very tonally different from who he actually is. Now, no matter who you are, being the CEO of something is almost always a power flex on anyone. If you can say that you're the CEO of a company and it's a true statement, then I am immediately more intimidated by you than I probably should be. And Samuel A. Young, our main character's father, starts out just that. A large and incredibly intimidating man, wearing a suit turned away from his daughter, speaking formally and partially covered in the shadows. This man exudes confidence, and if I walked into a meeting with him, then I would be terrified. However, all of this is quickly unraveled when Sam doesn't want to talk about a rough weekend. He slams his desk and immediately breaks into tears. Any sense of professionalism or seriousness immediately flies out the window when it comes to his daughter and his wife. For those who have read Let's Play, it's not an overstatement when I say that Mr. Young probably loves his daughter and his wife more than any other person has loved anyone. Referring to his daughter as my peachy pumpkin poo, which is a mouthful, and even hanging a giant painting of his wife as the centerpiece to his office, and talking about her like she's dead when she's only been gone for 2 weeks. My dear beloved, you'd be so hurt to see how our daughter speaks to her loving father. I missed you so much, my dear. If only you were still with us today. She's been gone for 2 weeks, Pumpkin. This is the longest we've been apart. And has to resort to watching her erectile dysfunction commercials to soothe his pain, apparently playing it too loud. Even requesting that his daughter calls her, because, as he puts it, she said I've been calling her too much to ask when she'll be coming home, and now she won't answer her phone. And when Sam calls and she doesn't know when her mom's coming back, we see him heartbroken. Literally, there is a broken heart right above his head. Now, if you believe that he's a soft individual who can easily be pushed around, then you would be almost embarrassingly wrong. We hear from someone who's a little overly critical of Mr. Young, Charles Jones, speak about the CEO himself to Sam. Despite your father's utter infatuation with your mother, he is by far one of the most effective businessmen I have had the pleasure to work for. Through hard work, networking, and investments, his business was one of the few that survived the dot-com collapse of the 90s. Not many companies were so fortunate. Charles speaks highly of Mr. Young, even with his affection being something he sees as a weakness. And let's talk about that relationship. Samuel A. Young has really only been defined by 2 ways: an amazing and effective businessman, or a weeping and loving mess of a father. However, like most characters, there are multiple sides to every character. Take a small look at how Mr. Young and Charles view each other. We know how Charles views his boss. But look how Mr. Young views Charles as a threat. When Charles gives Sam a shirt after some coffee is spilt on her, Mr. Young walks in to see his daughter and a single man in a room alone, and her daughter is wearing that single man's dress shirt. His immediate thought is, well, an imaginary news broadcast. This is Tanya Cortez reporting at Corporate Hill, where a man by the name of Samuel Young has been arrested for strangling his department head to death with his bare hands. Witnesses stated Mr. Young was heard screaming, "I must protect the virtue of my peachy pumpkin poo," It is unclear what provoked the attack, but it is suspected that due to Mr. Young's daughter being in a room alone with a boy. Such a tragedy. Bud is woken up by his daughter, and settles on simply threatening Charles, to which he is unfazed by it. These two characters are interesting, especially their relationship with each other. They both kind of hate each other. While hate is a strong and exaggerated term, I'm kind of having difficulty defining it. They push each other forward in the strangest and least agreeable way possible. They find each other incredibly annoying, yet somehow good enough to work with. We hear from Jay, Mr. Young's son, that Charles is only kept around because he's good at his job. He's a master manipulator, which makes him effective. And while Charles respects his boss, he at the same time is well aware of his weaknesses. And this is apparent when Samantha, Mr. Young's wife, goes to Hawaii. We see Mr. Young take it poorly, collapsing on the ground and crying. While everyone is freaking out, Charles literally could not care less, even threatening to send a very sad-looking Mr. Young collapsed on the ground crying to his wife unless he shapes up. He does, doing a strange corporate Sailor Moon transformation thing, apologizing to his coworkers, promising his daughter that he'll get better, and proceeds to crush Charles's phone and order him a new one to get rid of the photo. Which is a bit extreme, but that's neither here nor there. To many, it may seem strange. Sure, a loving father may at times be doting and sometimes overbearing, but this seems to be to the extreme. So is it just exaggerated for the format of Webtoon, right? Remember what I said at the beginning of this video about responsibility? That you or I could be responsible, but there's a certain level of responsibility that a parent or a guardian may have that we may not understand or realize? I think that this moment, between two people who don't really like each other but respect each other, shows us. It shows us something that many of us have been fortunate enough never to go through. And be warned, it's kind of a long and kind of sad quote. Samantha wanted nothing more to have a big family, and I don't think the wedding bells were done ringing when she was pregnant with our son, Jay. He was healthy, beautiful, and perfect. A father couldn't ask for more. When she was ready, Samantha wanted to try for a second child. She became pregnant soon after, but she lost the baby. Then she lost another one, and another. Just when we had given up hope, Samantha was pregnant once more, and this time, they had made it safely to 5 months. I hated the idea of leaving her alone with Jay, but that weekend I had a business trip that I couldn't miss. When I got back, I could tell almost immediately that something was wrong. Jones, have you ever seen the life drain from the eyes of a person who means the world to you? When I close my eyes, I can still see her face. When I close my eyes, I can still see her face in that moment. I often talk about how Samurai is a miracle, and how close we got to losing her that day. But what I can never bring myself to talk about is how close Samantha came to dying. I complain about Cabana Boys and her being on the beach in a bikini, but what I'm really worried about is her being away from me. If only I hadn't gone on that damnable business trip and left her alone. None of that would have happened. My wife wouldn't have gone to labor so early. My daughter wouldn't have been born so prematurely. I personally believe that we are defined by difficulty. That who we are really comes out in moments of pain, misery, frustration, fear, anxiety, panic. And it molds us to who we become in the future, for the better or for the worse. Mr. Young may get a lot of flack from Charles, his coworkers, his wife, his daughter, even the security team, even other people who don't know who he is. But it's not like we don't understand why he acts the way he does. Samuel A. Young is a father that's gone through hell, not only losing many children before even being born, but almost losing the love of his life and his daughter, almost at the same time. That's why we see two sides to Mr. Young. We see the loving, doting father, the one who would do absolutely anything for his family. who would move his business to the ground, who would install expensive air conditioners to help his daughter work better, live better. And we see the businessman, the one who's not afraid to make enemies and crush phones with his bare hands and imagining murdering people. These two personalities may be incredibly different, but they add into a character who at times can be sweet, kind, gentle, loving, and other times is a terrifying man who can probably murder you. That's why I'm putting Samuel A. Young into chaotic neutral, both a nice and loving father, and someone who I am personally deeply scared of. But that's just my opinion. Well, what do you think of the dear old dad? Do you love him? Do you think he's too much? Leave it in the comments, and like always, thank you for watching.